Was I supposed to sign up to help out on Playground somewhere?
That hasn't come out yet.
Yeah.
Great.
It's far off. They haven't even chosen who's going to get to do something yet.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, Hannah, did we submit our thing?
I trust Travis did.
I trust that Travis did too.
Oh, what do y'all want to do?
You'll see.
This meeting is being recorded.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to our News from the Real World podcast, where we talk about the top 10 comment-generating posts on the blog every week. My name is Parker. This is Evan.
I'm a scenic designer.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm a third-year sound designer.
Hi, I'm Grace. I'm a first-year costume designer.
I'm Parker, a second-year stage and production manager.
I'm Brooke, and I'm a first-year stage and production manager.
Some guys have all the luck. I was born with glass bones and paper skin. Every morning I break my legs, and every afternoon I break my arms. At night, I lie awake in agony until my heart attacks put me to sleep. Oh, no! No! Ow.
And on that note, Evan, would you like to start us off for the week?
Sure. Our first article is called, it's headlined, United Steelworkers call on Pittsburgh to vote with projected batlight campaign. So the United Steelworkers is the union for steelworkers, and they are displaying Biden-Harris projections on large buildings in various swing states, in various swing state cities especially. And they say they want to spotlight quote, how elections and politics impact workers and their communities. There's a further quote that I'll read here from the president of United Steelworkers. He says, USW members across the country are familiar with the consequences of the broken promises they have endured for the last 4 years, says Conway. The president claims to have saved jobs, but his failed policies are responsible for hastening the loss of manufacturing employment. I have very little to say about this. I think it's interesting that a lot of groups that have not been involved in politics are coming out on one side or another during this election. It certainly seems to speak to the way people feel about what's going on in politics right now.
Definitely. It seems to me also, I mean, and this could be just kind of, I've come of age in the last 2 elections, and it seems like everything's being publicized in new and creative ways this time around, and there's a lot more accessibility to this election than I believe I've seen in the past, and this is just a great example of that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty straightforward article.
Yeah.
Very short, not a ton of nuance. It's cool to see people fighting the good fight.
Yeah. I guess, speaking of using technology to showcase things, there's this great article about a virtual reality festival that I assume is based in Venice during precedented times. But just a nice little article written up, kind of explaining what VR is and some of its technology, its hardware, and some examples of things that were submitted to this festival. You know, it's short, simple, sweet, to the point. It's really interesting. VR is really, really cool, but it's a little disorienting if you're not used to it. Yeah, and it's it's the future of probably a lot of entertainment, not only video games, but movies as well, I assume.
Do any of y'all have VR goggles?
I do not. Do you?
I don't either. The pandemic, and this article specifically makes me feel like I should.
They're expensive though.
Yeah.
Even the cheaper ones cost you $300.
I don't have a pair, but my stepdad does. And watching him put them on and not knowing how technology really works and just wandering around the house lost was a sight to see.
pre-COVID, a group of us went to this like arcade, and there was almost like a boxing ring, it looked like, mapped out, and there were 4 different stations where you could put on the goggles and walk around in the world with other people. And I didn't do it, but I'm very intrigued. It seems like technology that is certainly going to be coming up in theater in the next couple of months, maybe.
I'm excited for the next iteration of it. I feel like something has to change to make it accessible to the sort of people who buy Nintendo Switches, and not just the people who buy, the Oculus.
I think the real prohibitor right now is cost, and there isn't a lot of, market share for it right now. People aren't convinced why they need VR. There's not a lot of titles for consoles. The hardware and software are kind of still in its infancy to some aspects, but there's some really cool things that you can do, and it seems to be kind of modular, like getting into all the things from the VR class that I'm taking outside of the theater department. Like, they're building suits so you can like touch and feel things happen to you, or there's shoes that will allow you to walk and that's how the character moves, all sorts of cool things.
Yeah, I think one of the things that might have to happen before this becomes technology that the average Joe on the street cares about is one of the big video game companies has to come out with a VR headset. I think if a Nintendo or a Xbox or PlayStation came out with one, then I think that would be. I think people who make games would be more likely to start making games for them.
PlayStation has a VR set. Then there's Oculus, there's Vive, and there's a couple of others that make headsets. The big one that was released recently was Half-Life.
Alex,
we did the game in VR, and you can play it in VR, and it's really kind of cool to watch.
Has anyone used a VR headset before?
I got to last year. As part of another class that I was doing, we were creating a virtual reality buggy race. So for those of you who don't know, buggy is this downhill race around campus, down Front Street past, I forget what that huge building is in Phipps Park. That happens every year for the engineers and clubs and all sorts of things like that. So we were doing a VR version of that, which got cut short because of COVID. But I got to try on the headset a couple times and like play through what we were creating. It was a lot of fun.
Very cool. I can bring up the next article.
So this article is titled "What Intimacy Coordinators Could Bring to How Love and Sex Are Portrayed in Dance" by Zachary Wittenberg. And it's the topic is pretty much just about how we can start bringing this sort of moderation to dance, just because it's sort of a part of the industry that hasn't really seen that role yet in the process as much as you do in film, television, and theater. And especially over the recent years with intimacy coordinators becoming more popular, performers and actors are feeling more comfortable requesting that or expressing their needs as well. So they interview a few people who are part of the dance world, and basically what a lot of people say is that dance is a very intimate thing. The process can be intimate, so sometimes boundaries can get really muddied, and depending on who you're working with, one or the other can feel sort of stifled during the creative process. But overall, I think it does advocate for the idea that, if dances can be choreographed, why can't we just view intimacy like choreography in a way where it's consistent, repeatable? And there's a great little quote. Someone just says that it creates the language for accountability, which I think is really important, as I'm sure we've heard the stories of a lot of actors who go method in like movies, and don't stick to things like fight choreography, which obviously has very obvious repercussions if you don't follow that. So,
and staging intimacy has those same repercussions, and I think in a lot of ways that it's important to see those parallels. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I have only recently seen people who sort of, they do a little bit of, like, a lot of fight choreographers I've worked with now are specializing in intimacy as well, which I think is great because, like you were saying, Parker, similar repercussions if you don't create sort of a consistent and stable environment for that. But I've only seen that role, at least where I was working, maybe in the last year or so. But it is great because they are starting to consistently bring them on for every show as opposed to shows that we think might need them. And yeah, I think I'm all about it because I think back to when I was in undergrad and we did A Streetcar Named Desire. And I just remember how uncomfortable that tech process was, not just because, you know, two people have to awkwardly be very intimate on stage, but thinking of like the trauma that can come from not doing something correctly. And another good point they bring up, and I think a lot of people in theater do this, but creating closing practices to sort of denote when you are done, like when we are done, you know, doing what we're doing in the rehearsal room, and like when we are now just people, friends, colleagues outside of the rehearsal room. So
yeah, I think it's fascinating, that kind of malleable boundary that has to exist. And, you know, I guess I never really thought about it with dance because, I mean, I guess we're so far removed from dance to some respects hidden in theater, depending on your focus. But like, there's always touching, there's lips, there's how close you get. All of that's got to be, you know, affirmative consent for everything that happens, even though like the director wants it this way, but not being comfortable. I think it's kind of nice that our industry is more open to the actors or dancers or whatever going, whoa, slow down. I'm not okay with this yet, or I'm not all right with this at all.
I immediately think about like parallels in musicals, you know, shows like Spring Awakening and Pippin, in ways that same similar type thing where the staging of these intimate moments are in a dance number, and how that should translate to dance as a whole other genre. You know, I mean, I think that's a super positive thing that's bleeding over, and these new positions that are being created in the last couple of years are beneficial across platforms.
Yeah, I worked on a production of Heathers that did not have an intimacy choreographer and didn't have a director that was mature enough to stage it. So I'm really glad that this is being more and more talked about and more prevalent, so we can eliminate that and eliminate those toxic situations.
and hopefully just make theater and dance and film and television just a less toxic environment where we listen to the needs of our actors. And, you know, hopefully this is also sort of heading towards a more just safer environment from any kind of harassment or anything that could happen in the workplace. But yeah, dances, I don't know a lot about dance, so it was hard for me to like really connect and like fully understand the hesitance that some people have in terms of the creative process. But yeah, the article also says like it's a weirdly intimate thing, and I think it's similar to like musicals in a way, with the aspect of dance. I think just how close people are as friends. But you know, my only experience was in undergrad, and like you know, in theater, it's like if someone has a quick change, you've got to like set up a booth for them. You've got to have a dedicated dresser. But, you know, it's like chaos. It's like they all just like start taking off all their clothes in the hallway, you know, backstage. And then you're just like, oh, there's like 30 people changing out of leotards right now, and they're all on the floor. And you're just like, this is madness. But yeah, I can see how, I don't know a lot about dance, but I can see how it can, I'm sure a toxic culture can sort of be cultivated through the process.
Transitioning a bit, another very niche and specific type of theater talked about in the articles this week was an article on AmericanTheater.org titled Aroma-turgy, What Smell Got to Do with It? I loved reading this article in a lot of ways because it's like a nuance of live theater that we've all been missing since March. And it just talks about how like that olfactory sense can really bring you someplace and really elevate your theatrical experience in many different ways. Kind of my favorite thing it talks about, the article talks about, it was written, oh, I'm so sorry, written by Mark Blankenship. He speaks a little bit about the smell on a pillow is a specific type of cologne, and in like a promenade style production where somebody is relatively close to that bed, he says maybe 1 in 3 nights somebody will smell that pillow and think, oh, that smells like my high school boyfriend. And just to have that little element of personal connection to the story helps kind of translate that. And it's something that you don't often think about. I immediately went back to a production I was doing in undergrad of Medea, and we had thought that it would be great to have incense throughout the production and that it would be an easy ad at the beginning of tech. But something like that is just so, we ended up having a fire marshal on set the whole time because we set the fire alarm off day one, you know, and we had to hold tech for a little while because there was just too much smell and smoke on stage. So it's a tricky thing to add, but when it's done right, I think this article really highlighted the benefit in specific design of smell.
Smell can be so effective. And one of the things I think this article points out that is interesting is that it's harder in a theater to have a smell like start at a specific moment and stop at a specific moment, right? Like it's sort of either it's in the air or it's not, and you might have to have it there the whole show. I think that I've certainly seen some promenade pieces where I've noticed that different spaces smell different. I think that's a really exciting way to use it. And I remember working on a production of, I remember being near people who worked on a production of Wait Until Dark. If you know it, there's a scene where someone takes out like kerosene or something to light the place on fire. And what they did, it was a small black box-esque theater, they had the kerosene bottle with just water on stage, and then someone at the back of the auditorium opened a thing of real kerosene, and the entire audience smelled it, you know? Super effective.
That is so cool.
But it's one of the, you know, it's a very specific situation, of course.
A thing that I was thinking about is who's in the structure that we think of when we think of a production team, who's responsible for something like that?
Right.
Smell
They get
designer.
on props, probably.
Props, I would think the same.
Yeah.
Scenic prop type thing.
They're so underappreciated, those props people.
But who knows? I mean, any of these things can involve electrics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say, they're very like abstract but also complicated versions of this that I've heard about. I think there was a production of The Importance of Being Earnest where it was, you know, it's a very kind of like pretty show, and the director at the top of one of the acts where they're in the garden, they closed, you know, the curtain, and then they opened it and they changed the set, but it was like a wall of roses, and they actually like released a scent of like these roses. So everyone was like, wow, like, you know, it's like they're in this English garden and it's beautiful. And, you know, I think even something as little as that, for something that I feel like a lot of people know, like The Importance of Being Earnest, so like I know how this is going to go, just kind of elevates and, I don't know, makes it like you're a part of it, a little inside in for the audience.
Little finishing touches that are so important.
I'd be curious to see this become a thing that like people do full time, but I imagine that a lot of shows won't care to do it.
Hand out scratch and sniff stickers to the audience beforehand.
Scented Sharpies.
I worked on a production of Beauty and the Beast, and our theater moms decided to bake baked goods for intermission, but they did it at a time, and the kitchen was right behind the theater, so they did it at a time when when things were coming out of the oven, Be Our Guest was starting. So the audience like got this smell of like baked goods cooking during Be Our Guest, the dining room scene, and then intermission hit a song after, and they got to eat these baked goods. So
That's also clever marketing.
Yeah, very smart. Somebody was thinking when they came up with that plan.
Doesn't Waitress do that?
Yeah,
They do, yeah. Waitress,
Yeah, but it's like
I think they do it on tour too.
Yeah, but it's like a
crazy.
pie that's not edible because they had to like scientifically like figure out how to make it smell like the most delicious through the whole theater, but they're like, you should not eat this pie, it is not good.
Wow,
Chemicals.
I like that less. I was hoping that the entire cast of Waitress was chowing down a pie and intermission.
Yeah, the crew is like, it's torture to watch them throw out this thing every night, and it's like baked in like a convection oven like in the lobby, and they kind of just like, it's like got to start 25 minutes before curtain or something, so
That's
for
torture
optimal
to
pie
not also
smell.
not sell baked goods too. That is mean, I think.
yeah.
I think they do.
I think
Oh,
they give
good.
everyone pie, or they sell it.
Good. They better.
The article
Nice.
also talks about cooking on stage, and if you have a moment where a character is cooking on stage and you add that olfactory sense into the audience, well, one, you know, at what point does it reach each of the individual people? But it would give like more of, it would allow, finishing up my thought here, it would allow the suspension of disbelief, there we go, that's what I'm looking for, to really just bring people back into the world of the play.
All right. If we're moving on, the next article up is Irondale and NYPD use theater to build empathy and community by the BroadwayBlog.com. This was really interesting to know that this was a thing pre-pandemic. A Brooklyn-based ensemble, Irondale, has a ongoing workshop that's called To Protect, Serve, and Understand. That's a combination with, they work with the New York Police Department. It's a 10-week, 40-hour workshop. And it was sidelined last spring due to the pandemic. But now they're back on and they're doing it over Zoom. And it's a 2-part Zoomcast discussion based workshop that they work on problem solving skills, actor training techniques, and real life communication skills for these police officers to employ in their work, and just kind of resolving conflict. Since they started this, more than 100 police officers and civilians have participated in it. And it's been seen by more than 2,500 people. And one of the quotes that stood out to me is that we are facing an unmistakable crisis that has both police and civilian lives at stake. Change can only happen when we can truly hear each other and understand each other. That takes work and guts. And I think that was really good. The really interesting point to make sure that we're understanding both sides of any discussion.
I thought this article raised a lot of questions, and I certainly had things when I finished reading the article where I was like, I'm still not sure how I feel about some of this. And that statistic you just read, in particular, I thought was not very useful. But 100 police officers and citizens. Like, what's the breakdown of that? Like, is it 5 police officers and 95 citizens, or is it, you know? I think it's a very interesting project, and I think it's an exciting use of theater for sure.
I think there's certainly value in theater as therapy in ways, and this seems like a way to really aid that relationship that we're going through. And looking at it now, I mean, you said this was happening before the pandemic. Looking at it where we're at now as a society, it seems even more important. And I would be interested in what something like this would, like how something like this could spread. And I have done minimal research on it, but it seems like such a great thing.
They're also making it into a podcast as well. So I think that'll reach even more people.
I kind of like this idea of using theater for, therapy, rehabilitation, and other sources of outreach rather than, just pure entertainment or, you can get into some weird circle jerk leftist circles with some theater about like, oh yes, the plight of these people, pat ourselves on the back, we're the good white people, or however you want to discuss it. I know, well, I had a teacher, one of my acting teachers from undergrad had a company that would go into the prisons around Ohio to like work with all of the inmates to kind of like give them an outlet for other, emotions and other things, and the reason why they're in prison in the first place. I think it's kind of cool.
Mhm.
This particular project might be too little too late or not enough, or
Yeah, well, and of course it's voluntary, right? Like I think it speaks to, one of the things we've been coming to terms with is that there's a broad variety of people and reasons that people become police officers, right? And if I had a thesis, I just lost it. But it's interesting because I think that a lot of people who talk about police reform are not thinking about the individual police officers and how to empathize with their situation.
Would we say that we as theater artists are better at de-escalation?
That's a good point.
That's a hard one.
Well, I was joking. I was thinking about it the other day, but I'm like, some poor teenager who works at like a Baskin Robbins is probably more trained in de-escalation than some of the police. But I would like to think that the empathy helps them, at least in terms of de-escalation, understand the other person or the group and where they're coming from, especially when it comes to situations of people who have certain mental health disorders, or people who just don't have like the ability to communicate adequately with the police. So not that, it's solely on them, but
I love the theater, and I hope that theater solves all the world's problems. So there's a part of me that thinks that asking police officers to come voluntarily learn empathy from theater artists, maybe there's something else that's already gone wrong.
I also think that it was interesting that one of the things I'm glad about is that this isn't just a thing that police officers can be like, oh, I can spend 2 hours out of my day and go and do this and say I did it and it's done. It's like a 10-week workshop, so it does require a good amount of time commitment and effort, which says something about the people who do voluntarily sign up for it.
yeah.
Certainly seems like a good first take, and potentially it can get better with age and as it's done more and more.
We're not going to put out the cynicism hat. We're going to be positive.
I know we're all towing the line.
I was gonna put on my cynical hat, but I was like, no, I'm not gonna put it on. We're gonna be positive, and we're gonna do some self-love, which is exactly what our next article is all about. Beware the imposter syndrome, which is this super cute faux horror story that is in this kind of Big Mouth-esque monster trying to do bad things to you about the imposter syndrome, which is this kind of feeling of you don't belong somewhere, or you aren't worthy of something, or can't do something, and you know this, but no one else around you seems to have realized or know this. So you just walk around waiting for somebody to finally pick up on you're not supposed to be there. But no students, you do belong here at this university.
Well,
no one made a mistake.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Like, obviously insecurities are not rational necessarily, but there's something like, if you're a student, how can you be an imposter student, right? Like we're all here because we don't know things. We're all here to learn, right?
I had never heard the term imposter syndrome before I came here last year for my first year of grad school. And the second I heard it and it was explained to me, I was excited in a weird way because I was like, there's a term for how I feel.
Totally.
I'm not alone.
and weirdly just defining that has helped me acknowledge that that's it's not doing myself any good by thinking in that way, you know? And I enjoyed reading this article. I thought it was very, like you said, a cute way of putting someone's insecurities, I guess, into
Anthropomorphizing it.
There you go.
Very cute.
Yeah, as one of 3 first-year students in this Zoom room, I definitely felt a little bit of imposter syndrome the first few weeks, especially with the fact that we're all virtual and everyone before our year pretty much knows each other and has had classes with each other and has worked on productions with each other. And we're not working on productions. We're not in classes in person with each other. So it's like, I see.
It's so unfortunate because there were so many in pre-COVID world. There's so many get-togethers and events that happen at the beginning of the year where we're able to form those connections, and it's got to be tough. I'm so sorry for the 3 of you.
Well, I don't know. I feel like knowing my peers in this first year, I think it proves that we all really want to be here, because a lot of us could have easily chosen not to enroll this first year. And I think when we do have those like virtual hangouts, or even when we're just talking in class, I would like to think that everyone sort of understands that we do have like a slightly deeper connection, that like we're really trying to like get to know each other, and we're trying to collaborate and share ideas. So I'm trying to like not wear the hat of cynicism. I'm trying to be like, no, this is great. And sometimes I'm always just like, in the back of my head, a different kind of insecurity. I'm like, oh my God, does everyone think I'm crazy? I'm like, hey everybody, how's it going? So I'll just
it's
put that out there.
Okay feeling, no matter how old you get, no matter what you know, no matter what experiences you've had, you will always feel it. It is okay.
Well put.
Oh, this one's mine. This is a complicated article. So the headline is, Hungary students are making a last stand against Viktor Orbán's power grab. I had to read this a few times to figure out what was going on. I know nothing about the political situation in Hungary. I'm glad I know about it now, to be clear. So I try to bullet it out, what's going on. So in 2010, Hungary elected an authoritarian president named Viktor Orbán Fidesz, which I am mispronouncing. His government seized control of the media, education, legal, and finance systems, and formed a group to supervise theaters in 2008. They're trying to take over theater institutions, and specifically the University of Theater and Film Arts, which, because its name is in Hungarian, is acronymed as SZFE. And that institution has sort of a left liberal worldview and ethos. And the government asked them to privatize, gave them too little time, and then like moved up the deadline for them to privatize. And when they didn't privatize in time, they imposed a board of governors over top of them, including the head of the body that they formed, the 2008 group that supervises theaters. So the president of that group is now the president of the board of governors of this theater school, SZFE. And the students and faculty are fighting back in nonviolent protest ways. So they formed a human chain from the university to the Parliament building. The staff is considering a strike, but the government, which controls the news, is running news stories bashing the school and talking about how terrible they are and that kind of thing. So it's this odd last stand against authoritarianism thing that's happening in the halls of a theater school, and they I think they're occupying the building right now as well. It's a weird moment in Hungary.
That was very well summarized.
Thank you.
Yeah, shit's fucked, yo.
I was going to say I'm just taking it all in because it's just a lot to really think about.
Yeah.
But what Hannah said is also very true.
Right. I am not good at following broad political trends, but I certainly have heard people discuss that there seems to be a rise in authoritarianism across the globe right now, which is not great.
I had to reread it, like the first couple paragraphs again. Like I did a double take. I was like, wait a second. Since 2010, I thought Erdogan. Oh wait, that's Turkey, not Hungary. What countries are we in here? It's everywhere.
I just think there's something to be said about theater students really fighting for what they want, and it's a very, very horrible situation, but it is good to know that there's people fighting for what is right.
Yeah, the theater, I think the theater really loves, at least the Western theater really loves narratives of like small groups of oppressed people coming together and making a difference, right? Or failing miserably if you like Les Mis. But if you have like Newsies and Urinetown, which I guess also fails miserably in the end. Spoilers.
How dare?
So I wonder if that's part of the theater world, is this belief that in that narrative that small groups of people who truly believe in something can make a difference.
Everyone loves the David versus Goliath.
The what?
David versus Goliath.
Oh right, yeah.
The underdog.
Yeah, people love an underdog for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's the American. Well, is it specific to
Hungarian
America?
dream.
I don't
It's the
think
Hungarian dream.
Yeah.
On a very different note.
So much for setting these up in a smooth and logical order that
that would be my fault. But on the lightandsoundjournal.com, an article titled "Showing London in a New Light," published this month, I thought was a really great read. It's a short read. It basically summarizes this movement. Center for London is funding a new research project called Lighting London. And essentially what that looks like is taking the time of the pandemic. A lot of people are taking this as time to stop, rethink, regroup, and look at what can be done in a positive way. They are looking at the tail end of the pandemic and what London looks like post-COVID, and anticipating a larger number of people being outside, particularly at night. So this is a big movement to light the streets of London in a more specific and efficient way. They talk about like being a warmer light and just bringing a better atmosphere to the streets that the working class and all of these people will be using more often. And they show a nice picture of what it looked like before and what it looked like after, and really just taking time to kind of, it's less bright, it's more planned and designed, as opposed to what is common in industry that they talk about in the article, of just putting light to light and make something bright, as opposed to thinking about the specificity of lighting the steps instead of the entire courtyard or something along those lines. It was a short article, but a good read.
I like this, and I like this idea a lot, because I think we're getting into the time of year where we should be hanging out outdoors, and it's going to get colder, and and having spaces that feel less threatening to be outdoors in. I think the article ignores the reason why those spaces feel the way they do now, right? Like I think that a lot of public spaces have been designed to discourage homeless people from hanging out in them, discourage like people from loitering, especially low-income people from loitering. So I'm curious to see what pushback, if any, they get from local businesses, that kind of thing. I mean, I think that homeless people should be allowed to hang out on the streets, of course. but I think that a lot of people do not want them near their streets.
I think it's kind of cool.
Oh, I think it's cool too.
It's one of those little thought about facets of urban planning and urban design, how you actually live in the space rather than what the space is used for. The lighting, is it loud because it's all concrete and the buildings are all concrete right next to a really busy street corner, so no matter what you do to that outdoor space, it's too loud to be used by people? Or at night, can people see? Are there huge gaps? Is it pleasant to walk down the square?
I think, yeah, it's just elevating design, because now it's so much more about intention than just the effect, right? Like just doing it for the sake of doing it. And another benefit of being more conscious about lighting, especially outdoor lighting, is that it can reduce light pollution, which is a thing that, isn't at the top of our minds with everything else the Earth is going through, but it can make a huge environmental impact as well, a positive impact.
I think the article talks about that.
Yeah,
How it's usually these kind of utilitarian, just put light up, but if we plan it out, then the carbon footprint can actually decrease because there's less light. Things don't overlap too much.
Speaking about light and nope. Thanksgiving.
So close. Good try.
Macy
Love
is
it.
planning a smaller but camera-ready Thanksgiving parade by Karen Matthews of pbs.org. I heard a lot about this before I read this article, and I've heard a lot of misinformation before I read this article. Lots of people going around saying, oh, it's canceled, it's not happening. And it is still happening, just not at the scale that most of us know and love. And it is still being broadcast, which makes me happy because I've never seen it in person anyway. It's still being broadcast from 9 to noon on NBC, but it's going to include live and recorded elements. They're not flying anybody in. Like there's not going to be any bands, high school or college. Most of the parade performers are going to be locally based. The balloons will still be flown, but they will be tethered to specialized vehicles that have been tested and approved by the city police and transportation departments. So replacing 80 to 100 people per balloon with vehicles. And they haven't yet released the lineup of characters and performers, but they are going to shortly.
What a great way to keep a tradition alive, I guess.
Yeah, I usually watch a good chunk of that parade, and it's a long parade. I'm okay with it being a little shorter.
Yeah, they also they shortened the distance too.
1 block now, right?
Yeah, it's normally, they don't say what it's normally, but yeah, now it's just 1 block. It's a stretch of 34th Street.
That seems really difficult. How do you stage a parade on one end of a block and have it end on the other end? Where do they all go when it's over?
It's normally a 2.5 mile.
Right, but they still have to come from somewhere and go to somewhere.
I guess it's just what they're filming.
Yeah, that's
What
essentially
you
it
see
is. It's just the film, and then
World's
all that's
shortest
filmed
parade.
anyways, right? It's just that 1 block.
They're not-
right in front of the main
Yeah.
store.
In-person spectators this year as well. So
Oh, there's still going to be a crowd.
Right. Oh, I'm
Oh, yeah.
sure.
And it's gonna be terrifying. I went one year as like a freshman in college, and it was really, I understand why a lot of New Yorkers are like, I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah.
It was miserable. It was like 30 degrees, and the temperature was going up as the morning progressed, but it somehow felt like it was getting colder. And then my friend got like the flu from it. So, yeah, there's a lot of people and it's cold, and you can only see like one part of the parade, but now we can all watch it from the comfort of our homes.
I wonder if some of these changes will stay in post-pandemic years. And I think the people who held the balloons were all volunteers anyway, but it still seems easier to just tether it to a car and have the car go by. I wonder if Santa will be there this year.
These are the hard-hitting questions.
Yeah, well, I want to know. Inquiring minds. I'm excited for this lineup.
Is Santa local?
I'm sure they can find a Santa local in New York.
I'm sure there's a lot of Santas. I have a lot of people with Santa suits.
Yeah. But only one true Santa.
Yeah.
And he's in here.
Right.
Wait, what is it? What is it from New York? That Santa bar
Miracle on
hopping
34th Street
thing?
Oh,
No.
they're like drunk or the drunk
Everyone
Santas.
gets up and gets dressed up as Santa and just like hits every single bar or something. Santa-con,
Santa-con.
that's what it is. Yeah. I bet that's not gonna happen this year.
Nope.
What a country, huh?
And it's like everyone's least favorite day of the entire year.
Mm-hmm.
I hesitate to say this because it goes against what we've all been talking about here about this. I just have a question that I don't quite have the answer to, but what do we think about the pressure of keeping these things going in the year and in this year? What do we, because it's certainly not what it was. I mean, I for one am excited to watch the show. It's certainly a tradition to watch, but what do we think about does anyone else have any opinions on that pressure to continue to produce?
I think there's something nice and comforting about that kind of normalcy, in a sense.
Yeah.
That like no matter what's happening, we're strong, we're resilient, we're still gonna get through whatever is happening in the world, in the country, and that's not going to shake this longstanding, fixture of.
I like your idea that the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade is what's keeping us together as a nation. I guess I still have my cynical hat on.
I told you.
That's where my head has been.
Yeah.
But hey, it's creating jobs, right? Like it's creating work. And for probably a lot of people who haven't been working this year or working as much. So I'm all for it. Like if we can prove why the arts and entertainment industry is important, by all means, let's do it, because it seems like it's the only thing that's consistently like keeping people going right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested to see how much of this is actually going to be recorded, because it's still a 3-hour parade. It's still going to go from 9 to noon.
But they're using archival stuff too, which will pad it out.
Yeah.
I guess the parade has to stop.
Yeah, it's 3 hours of coverage, but how much of that is going to be commercials?
Yeah.
At least an hour.
Like, let's
like
be real
NBC,
here.
Those NBC like cuts where it's like, "Hi, I'm so and so. Thank you for watching."
Yeah, exactly. How
Another
much gets
hour
taken
of
up by
those.
everything. Yeah. Sorry, that was a cynical hat to
Speaking
put back
of-
on about.
Speaking of Thanksgiving, let's talk about something that's not related to Thanksgiving at all. So this article is called 100 Facebook Employees to Test Future Augmented Reality Glasses on U.S. University Campus. So Facebook is like, we want to create some AR glasses to be because Google created something, and so now they're like, let's do it, let's call it Aria, which sounds like a great name for augmented reality glasses. So basically they're testing them out, starting off with I think 100 participants. I'm not fully sure, like I'm a little confused about like the ultimate goal for these glasses, but they're actually partnering with Carnegie Mellon, their cognitive assistance laboratory, to build 3D maps of places like museums and airports. So I think in this specific instance, it's to help people who have like visual or hearing impairments. Sorry, I don't know why I said in hearing, but just to like better navigate like a surrounding, or I think at the end of the article, it's also like just to give them a sense of like what the world is like. I don't know. And it's a little like, I'm sure there's some controversy with it because there's a lot of controversy with Facebook, but like Facebook is like we're not collecting data on people's faces. Like, we're very strict about what kind of data is being collected and when. And I, like, I'm like, sure, we can say whatever we want. Like, I'm 6'5", and you just have to believe that because you can't see me standing right now. And this is sort of like I'm not trying to be cynical, but it's just like being realistic. It's like, Facebook is like, we're not going to use this for, purposes to profit off of people's personal data. And I'm sure there's a lot of federal regulation when it comes to like public spaces being recorded. Anyways, that's sort of my 2 cents just on that. But when I was reading this, I was like, oh my gosh, this would be so awesome to have, like, as a person who grew up as a very like socially anxious person, being afraid to go to new places, because I was afraid that like I wouldn't know, I would look stupid because I didn't know where I was going or something like that. And I still feel like that. Like, I walk into campus and I'm like, you got this. And then I'm just like, and everyone's like, are you okay? I'm like, I'm not okay. I don't know where anything is. But how that can help people. I don't know, just maybe it makes certain things just more accessible and easier for people. Like, it could be as simple as like getting to know what the DMV looks like before you go for the first time, or getting to know like what your polling station might look like. I understand that these are very like specific, but I see the benefit in all of this. I'm not totally sure how it's going to go in terms of how they execute it, but I guess I think so right now, the only people who are like actively going out into the world with this technology to like document things, I think they said it was in San Francisco.
In Seattle, yeah.
Yeah, so, but who knows? Carnegie Mellon might be next. Pittsburgh.
Well, what is interesting about this is that what the device they're giving out is not augmented reality glasses. It's a recording device. They're trying to figure out what people look at and then track eye movements so they can get a better sense of how people look at the world. And I guess I share the same concerns you brought up, which is like, there's a certain amount of trust you have to put in Facebook to use that data respectfully.
Who does not have a history?
I for one welcome our new lizard man overlords.
Right, God. Well,
I mean, like, they already know everything about us, right? Like, when people are like, I don't want them stealing my data. And I'm like, what are they going to do? See my grocery list on the notes app on my phone? Like,
right.
Yes, I need more black beans. Great.
I don't know. There's some weird people with internet search histories out there.
Well, maybe they need to be exposed. I don't know.
I don't know. I think it's kind of neat. Like the eye tracking movement and how people react to external stimuli, like what they see, what they hear, and how that moves their head, which one of the big problems with extended reality, so augmented reality, virtual reality, and mixed reality is a lot of motion sickness. So understanding how people's eyes move and how they use their surroundings can help, make those things fit into their world and stay out of their world in a weird sense. So like, if you're lost someplace, then you have like a heads up display on your glasses or whatever, and you can like look around and see, where you need to go, or things like that. I think it's kind of neat.
It certainly seems interesting and new and very cool, but this is also going to sound very conspiracy-ish, but I mean, at what cost? What information are they getting that is new, and what is, I don't know, how much are they tracking, even though they say they're not? I mean, hasn't Facebook come under fire for that in the past?
Yeah. Well, Facebook does not have a good track record
right.
with using people's personal information. So I think, to go along with your conspiracy theory, maybe they're just going to create like robots of us and just release them one day, and we're just going to be so confused.
There is an AI program, I forget where in the world, but they called themselves Skynet, and that is not okay.
You can't do that.
No, we don't need Terminator. Thank you.
You've all seen Ex Machina.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Humans die.
It's one of those things where, first of all, I think that this product that Facebook is talking about developing is not going to exist for the next, 5 years, right? At least, conservatively. And if and when it came out, I can't imagine it being at a price tag, especially since most of us already wear prescription glasses, at a price tag where we would shell out the big bucks to get an overlay in a couple situations. I think the usage of it sounds so limited. I mean, I've never had an experience where I've needed to look at something on my phone and been like, oh, it's so inconvenient that I have to look at my phone instead of it being in the world, right? Like,
Yeah.
I just don't think that I'd be interested in this technology unless it did something that my phone doesn't already do, which seems unlikely.
And I guess it's like one of their goals in terms of accessibility is to help people with visual impairments, which is great. But also, I guess I just like it's like half a sentence where they mention that. I guess for me, I'm just a little confused on like the full range of what they plan on doing in terms of that, because there are so many different levels of visual impairment. And yeah, it's kind of like, I wish it were a little bit more defined, like what their goal is. It's a cool idea, but, you know, hopefully not to put on the tiny cynicism hat of cynicism, but I mean, we're kind of facing like a huge pandemic right now. Hopefully Facebook is also very actively doing something about that. Like I think I read somewhere a while ago that they're trying to figure out like contact tracing techniques via Facebook. If you like find out you have COVID and it like somehow notifies the friends, like people you're friends with on Facebook who may have been in like close proximity with you or something. And you're like, okay, well, first of all, how did you know we were so close together? But you know, like, I don't know. It's scary. Like,
Why does the government need to microchip us through vaccines when your phone does it already?
We've gone full conspiracy.
We've really taken a turn here.
We got what is it? The Mac
with the red
It's
string.
Always Sunny. Yeah, with the red strings everywhere. Yeah. I love it.
Well, on that incredibly exciting and happy note, this has been our podcast for the week. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you next week.